guys, thanks for tuning in for another week in review where I share with you the comics that I've read for the week. I know that the last few videos have been like really long. I try to make them as quick as I possibly can. I try not to make them excessively long. I have been editing out a lot of extra stuff I just felt wasn't necessary for videos. But I've also made another change. For now on, I'm going to timestamp each book, like when I start talking about that book. And down in the description box, not only is there going to be the link to the blog that has, like, you know, that features exactly all the books that are in the week in review, but according to their numbers in order that they're shown, I'm going to have down in the description box the timestamp for when I start talking about those books. So if you want to skip ahead to like a certain book and you don't want to sit through like 10, 15 minutes waiting until that book comes up, that way you can just jump right to the book you want to hear about. I figure this helps me out. This saves a little bit of time for you guys, like watching the content you want to see, and it doesn't exclude anybody. So, like, you know, it's not going to be favored versus types of books versus others. So yeah, and I'm going to try to go and backdate all my older videos. It might take some time, but I eventually will get through and do that. So the first book I read this week was an Image comic book. It is Descender Volume 1, Tin Star. I thought it was really cool that the character Tim-21, who is an android with a mysterious background, I'm going to say mysterious background. It kind of, like, I don't want to say too much. I don't want to spoil anything. But he has a connection with this alien force they call the Harvesters that's, like, all of a sudden threatening this, what is called the Intergalactic Collective or something like that. But I appreciate the fact that Jeff Lemire wrote this and that he didn't draw. I like Jeff Lemire's writing, don't get me wrong. I'm just not a big fan of his art style. So I'm kind of glad that this other guy, Dustin Nguyen, I think, it's a Vietnamese name. I don't want to butcher his name, so, but it's right there. And I think these watercolors are great. At first, I was almost skeptical about this book because in BookTube SFF, this has been kind of trending. And I'll admit, I like science fiction. I read a decent amount of it when it comes to comic books. So I was kind of skeptical. I'm like, maybe this is just another book that's just kind of trending on BookTube and it's not really that great. But it actually was a decent story. I found it quite interesting, and I think, like I said, I did rate this 4 out of 5 stars on Goodreads. I do think it is worth checking out, and a few other people have said that this book kind of reminded them, because the little boy android kind of reminded them of the movie Artificial Intelligence. I can kind of see where they're coming from with that point of view. So yeah, I do think that this is worth checking out. We have Echoes. This is another Image comic. This is not a volume, but it is a graphic novel because it's in its entirety here in this hardcover edition. The thing that's kind of different is when I looked the ISBN on Goodreads when I started reading this, it showed a completely different cover. But I thought this cover was kind of creepy, kind of cool. There isn't really too much on the back. There's just like these side panels and then these reviews. But I do have to say, I was very, very impressed with this. If you are a horror comics fan, even if you're just a fan of horror, I think this is a book you should definitely check out. And I'm kind of leery of what I should share with you guys about this book, because if I give away too much, I'm afraid I'm going to spoil it. It's mainly about this guy named Brian Cohn, whose father is in a nursing home. He shares a room with another guy who's always like talking and yelling and saying weird stuff, and they both got Alzheimer's. Now, I really honestly do not know too much about Alzheimer's, but this was a very good book for kind of like emphasizing like mental illnesses. And not only is there the Alzheimer's thing, but Brian Cohn suffers from schizophrenia, and he has to take medication at certain times, you know, to keep from hallucinating and being paranoid. He wears a watch to remind him of when to take his medicines. I can't say any more than that, but this was creepy. It was brilliant. Often at times I mention the schizophrenia thing and the delusions because there were times where Brian doesn't take his medicine and he can't separate reality from his hallucinations, which just made this book even that much more cooler. You have to, when you're reading this, really pay attention to everything. Like, pay attention to what other characters are saying, because it wasn't until I got to the end of this that I realized why it was called Echoes, and realized just what exactly had happened. It had a nice little surprise, shocking ending that just really summed this up. It does involve like a secret from the past. I can't say too much more about this because if I tell you, then I'll ruin it. But this was so creepy cool. And this, Hollywood, if you're listening, turn this into a movie. I really think this would be a blockbuster movie if somebody would turn this into a film. This was just so super creepy. It was so good. And I rated this 5 out of 5 stars on Goodreads. It's definitely worth checking out if you are a horror fan. After that, I read Image Comics' Hinge's Book 1, Clockwork City. It's considered, it says on the back it's a young adult fantasy, but it also says rated E for everyone. There's nothing to show on the back, it's just a plain white cover. But this book has such minimal dialogue. It was really kind of hard to get into this. I don't know if these people are just like little dolls or... It was kind of hard to understand. And like, I know she has like, I'm going to call it a familiar. They call it an odd. And it's this little cat that's just mischievous and gets into trouble and causes a lot of problems for her. That's the most I got out of this. And I know a lot of people, this is probably another example of a book that I think everybody rated this so highly on Goodreads just because the art, like they were impressed with the artwork. Honestly, I'm not really that impressed with the artwork. It looks like, you know, some digitally rendered stuff, so I'm not really too impressed with the artwork. I'm even less impressed with the story because I couldn't really follow what was going on other than the fact that, I think her name is Oreo? Yeah, that sounds weird, but it's spelled O-R-I-O. So I'm assuming her name is Oreo, and she's like new to Clockwork City, and she's trying to find a job, and they try her out in different things, but her little familiar, which they call an odd, was like causing problems for her, and it just ended at that. So I don't get it. Like, a lot of people rated this 4 out of 5 stars on Goodreads, and to be quite honest with you guys, I didn't think it was that impressive. I only gave this 1 out of 5 stars. I don't really see what's so great about it. Okay, up next we have Undertow Volume 1, Boatman's Call. This is another series from Image Comics, and to be completely honest with you, I took out a bunch of Image Comics because I wanted to find out more about Image, and I wasn't really sure what this one was about until I started reading it. It takes place in like a prehistoric time period where Atlantis was a real place, and it is a city run by mermen, if that makes any sense. But one of the problems I really had with this, it is a sci-fi horror action comic, and one of the things that I had an issue with was that whenever people try to, like, imagine, like, another kind of creature, they always try to make it look like it's human. And that's one of the things I just couldn't wrap my head around, because if these were people who originated before humans, then why would they have hair and why would they have boobs? Because that's a very mammal trait. So and the five fingers with the opposable thumb and all that. I just couldn't. I tried so hard to get into this for that reason. I mean, it did. I mean, the artwork is great. I mean, I love the artwork. And this isn't the first time I've seen artwork like this where they use watercolors and it looks like it's digitally manipulated. Where sometimes you'll see what looks like thumbprints or fingerprints, like, in the art. And it's kind of neat and cool that they do that, because it's almost like the artist is saying, hey, I created this and here's the proof. So these people, they're trying to find this fabled, like, amphibian, this guy who is one of them but has the ability to breathe on land, and they're trying to find him because they figure he's the key to their survival of their civilization, and if they can just get a sample of his blood, then their people can, their future people will be able to go on land. So with that, it was kind of interesting. I mean, I did enjoy it, but I did see a lot of problems with, like, the stuff I mentioned before. I don't remember if I rated this 4 out of 5 stars or 3, but it was worth reading, so if you're into sci-fi, you might want to check it out. After that, I read The Strange Tale of Luther Strode. This is another Image comic, and this has to do with the very wimpy, very nerdy Luther Strode. And what he does is he's sick of being that nerd who doesn't, he has, like, one friend. He, wants to have a girlfriend, but he's sick of being a wimp, so he orders this, like, Hercules-type book through the mail. He gets it, he reads it, and all of a sudden he's got these, like, these abilities. And, of course, there's his arch nemesis, the librarian. I'm not going to explain anything more about that relationship or what goes on with that, because then it would be spoiling this. But this is excessively gory. It has a lot of, like, ultra violence. Like, very little effort to, like, make people's heads pop like pimples. That type of stuff. It was very entertaining, although it was very bloody. And it's kind of superhero-ish, but not really, per se. I did enjoy this. I did rate this 4 out of 5 stars on Goodreads. It's not for everyone, though. I'm going to be right out there. It's not for everyone. After that, I picked up Liberty Meadows. This is another Image book, and this is an older Image book from way back when. And if you're not familiar, but the artist and the writer of this is Frank Cho. He has just this drawing style. He's known for doing, like, these pin-up style, like, beauties. Like, that's his trademark. But this was not what I expected. I didn't know it was going to be black and white. I know that this series is kind of, like, notorious. It has kind of a rep. But it's this animal preserve where, there's talking animals, and this lady and this guy live there, and they help take care of the animals. But it's not laid out like a serial. Like, it's not, like, they're like comic strips is what it is laid out like. So, I mean, I just thought this was okay. I just really, I'm a fan of Frank Cho's work, so I kind of wanted to, see what this was like. I probably will not ever pick up another Liberty Meadows book, but I wanted to be able to say, yeah, hey, I read that and I checked it out. So I only rated this one 3 out of 5 stars. It was just okay. I mean, if you're into, like, Calvin and Hobbes and stuff like that, you might enjoy this. It is what it is. After that, I read Bitch Planet Volume 1, Extraordinary Machine. And I have to say, this was one of the books I was, like, highly anticipating this book. I mean, as soon as I saw this on Goodreads when they were giving this away before it was released, I was like, I've got to read that book. And I finally got the opportunity to read it. And it is by Kelly DeConnick, I think is how you pronounce her name. Well, anyways, it's about these... It's like a prison planet where if you're not perfect... It says on the back, it says, non-compliant, do you fit in your box? Are you too fat, too thin, too loud, too shy, too religious, too secular, too prudish, too sexual, too queer, too black, too brown, too whatever it is, they'll judge you for today. You just may belong on Bitch Planet. So it has a very feminist edge to it. I do have to say this has a B-movie vibe to it. If you're not familiar with, like, B-movies, they're like these low-budget, like, faster pussycat, type movies. Very, girls, like, just kind of fighting and doing all these things, and a lot of nudity. There's a lot of prison shower scenes. But, I mean, this book I thought was really, really good until I got to what the main plot of this book is, and it's a sports thing. Yeah, if you know me, I'm not a sports enthusiast. I am not a fan of sports. So when I saw that, I was kind of really turned off. I mean, I'm all for, like, women empowerment. I mean, I really like that message this book had to offer. And I can understand that that's why a lot of women on Goodreads are like, they love this book. They rate it 4 or 5 stars for that reason. But, sorry guys, being that it is like a sports type thing, I just couldn't get into that. It's like some Italian, like, handball game, and I can only say, going back to the whole B-movie thing, like a murder ball type thing, I just couldn't get into that aspect of this book, and it was really kind of disappointing to me, so that's why, I mean, I did enjoy it, but I didn't think it was over the top good, so that's why I only rated this 3 out of 5 stars. I really set myself up thinking this was going to be much better than it was, and I just wasn't that impressed with it because of the whole sports element thing. Will I read Volume 2? Possibly. But I'm not going to go out of my way. Daredevil, the Daredevil You Know. I'm not sure which volume this is, but this is the newest Daredevil for Marvel. And I have to say the irony of the title, The Daredevil You Know, because, of course, the most recent Daredevil, he has revealed his identity to the world. Everyone knows it's Matt Murdock. Of course, something happened where his identity was revealed. I have not read that story. But this Daredevil lives in San Francisco, not Hell's Kitchen, and he is very public about his identity. And he's almost kind of, a showman when it comes to letting everyone know who he is. Like, there's one part of this book where he wears this bright red suit with a Daredevil belt buckle, and he signs autographs and everything. And I thought that was just kind of, I don't know, guys, that's not the Daredevil I know. So I kind of found it hard to really get into this story, and I'll admit I only rated this one 3 out of 5 stars. Up next we have Guardians of the Galaxy Through the Looking Glass. This starts out where, continues off from the last volume. And, of course, the Guardians of the Galaxy are wandering through the universe, and they come across a S.H.I.E.L.D. helicarrier, and they're trying to figure out why in the world a helicarrier is out in space where it does not belong. I won't say anything more about it because I don't want to spoil that part of the story for you. Along with that, there is part of the Black Vortex storyline. Like, I'd say at least half of this was the Black Vortex storyline, which I've already read. And then the final story led into the Secret Wars. So, since I've already read like half of this, and the Black Vortex story was probably the best part of this, but I'd have to say I only rated this one 3 out of 5 stars. I mean, it's just not as good as it started out. But, you know, it's worth picking up and reading if you like. Hey guys, I got a few 3-star books. I rated all 4 of these books 3 stars on Goodreads. I figured I'd say what the rating was up front, so if you choose whether you want to see what they are or not. I all gave them 3-star ratings because they were good. They're worth reading, but I wouldn't, like, go out of your way to seek them out, and they weren't that bad, so, yeah. The first one was Hell Yeah. This is an Image comic. This has to do with dimension hopping, doubles, like, there's this guy named Ben, and he has, like, someone is out to kill him and his doubles, so it gets a little complicated. It's in a world where superheroes are a new thing, people with powers. It was kind of interesting. It wasn't, like I said, it wasn't that bad. It's worth checking out if you're into superhero books. After that, I read Catwoman, Volume 6, Keeper of the Castle. Now, this one, I'm so used to Catwoman being Catwoman, but here she is a crime boss, and she has somebody else taking up her Catwoman costume. So she's no longer Catwoman. That's one of the reasons why I decided to only rate this one 3 out of 5 stars, because it was just okay. I would have preferred Catwoman to be Catwoman and not a crime boss. So, I will admit I do like this art style. This guy did the Dark Tower books. I don't remember his name, but good artist. I really like this style. After that, I read Clone Volume 1, First Generation. This was good. It's not an original idea. Government experiment where there's a bunch of clones, and there's, of course, you know, they're trying to figure out who is the original. So it was kind of interesting, but like it seemed a little too fast paced. Like it jumps right into the action, doesn't really introduce it in a good way. So that's why I rated it what I did, because I thought that it was just too rushed. But it's a good concept. It was a decent book. After that, I read Freshman Volume 1. I mean, it says it's Volume 1, but this seemed to be a standalone. And this is a project that Seth Green, the actor, worked on. First up first, I have to say, I wish somebody would have, like, edited this, because there's a lot of grammatical errors in here. Like, for instance, they say T-O and they should have used T-O-O. A couple of different things like that, like just little errors here and there throughout the book. But yet again, it's an interesting concept. A bunch of freshmen at a college, they're having to reside in the science building because they don't have dorms available. A science accident happens that gives them powers. And it's kind of unique powers, like ones you don't really see. So that was another reason why I thought this was a good read. It's worth checking out if you're into superhero books. It was kind of, you know, dumb, fun, you know. It was worth reading, let's just say that, aside from the grammatical errors. There's a lot of books, but now that I'm adding the timestamp to my videos, you'll be able to just skip to the books you want to hear about and not have to sit through a very lengthy video. And that's another reason why, like, when I went through that last batch of books, I told you that they were only 3-star rated. That way it saves you guys a little bit of time. If you're looking forward to what's going to be in next week's video, next week is going to be mostly the big 2 with a few independents. It's mostly going to be DC and Marvel books, about half and half DC, half Marvel. So if you've read any of these books, let me know what you thought of them, or if you found any that you are wanting to read, let me know below. And till next time, later guys.